My father betrayed me after I saved his company from $2 million in debt. I built it into a $150 million empire. But he made my brother CEO who never worked. So I took all the clients, contracts, and employees and left them with an empty shell that collapsed in 30 days. I'm 29 years old. I run a tech company that does like 200 million a year in revenue, and people usually tell me I got lucky or that I was born with talent for business. But the truth is, what I have is scars, a lot of scars, and a story I need to tell because I still wake up some days wondering if I did the right thing. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was 26 and my life was completely different. I had just finished my MBA. You know, one of those intensive programs where you basically don't sleep for 2 years, but you come out with your brain full of strategies and financial models and all those things you think you're going to use to conquer the world. My plan was to get a job at some big consulting firm, maybe in the city, away from my family and away from my father's business, which always seemed kind of boring to me, honestly. But then one Saturday morning, I got a call from my mom saying to come to the house, that my dad needed to talk to me, and her voice sounded weird, like worried but trying to hide it, you know? I got to the house. My parents lived in a pretty nice residential area, nothing ostentatious but comfortable, and I found my father in his office, surrounded by papers everywhere, open folders, calculator in hand, and he had that look of someone who hasn't slept in days. My father had founded his company like 30 years ago, an industrial components distribution company, and for years it had done well. Nothing spectacular, but enough to keep my brother Owen and me comfortable while we were growing up. Owen is 5 years older than me, and he was always Dad's favorite. I knew that since I was a kid, but it never bothered me that much until all this happened. The thing is, when I walked into that office that day, my father looked up and said, "Liam, I need your help. The company is in serious trouble." I sat down and he started explaining the situation, and basically the company was on the verge of bankruptcy with debts of almost $2 million, unpaid invoices everywhere, clients who had stopped placing orders because shipments were arriving late or incomplete, and a management team that apparently had been asleep at the wheel for years. I asked him where Owen was, because Owen technically worked at the company as vice president or something, though I never really knew what he did exactly, and my father was quiet for a moment before saying, "Your brother doesn't have the head for these numbers. You studied business. You can help me." And that's how I ended up canceling all my job interviews and moving back home to save my father's company. The first 3 months were brutal. I literally worked like 16 hours a day, reviewing every contract, every invoice, every operational process that was broken. I discovered that the main problem was that the company had grown without any real structure. Everything was chaotic. There were no proper inventory systems. The sales staff had no clear incentives, and they were basically losing money on every shipment because nobody had correctly calculated transportation costs in years. The first thing I did was renegotiate all the debts. I talked to each supplier and creditor personally, showed them a realistic payment plan, and demonstrated that the company could be saved if they gave me time. Then I implemented a complete management system. I bought software, trained the staff, fired some managers who clearly weren't doing their jobs. That was horrible, but necessary. And basically rebuilt the company from scratch. My father gave me total authority to make decisions, which was good because if I had to consult him on every little thing, we never would have made progress. He's from that generation that does everything on paper and distrusts computers. You know what I mean? Owen showed up at the office from time to time during those first months, always with some excuse for why he couldn't help more, that he had important meetings or that he was working on landing big new clients. He never saw evidence of any new clients, honestly, but my father always defended him, saying Owen had his own responsibilities. The relationship between Owen and me had never been bad exactly, but we weren't close either. He was the charismatic son who always knew what to say at family gatherings, while I was the quiet nerd who preferred to stay reading business books. So I guess we each had our role in the family. By the end of the first year, the company had gone from being in the red to having a small profit margin. We paid most of the most urgent debts, and we recovered like 60% of the clients we had lost. My father was happy, my mother was proud, and I was exhausted but satisfied because for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something real, something that mattered. What I didn't know was that I was just getting started. Over the next 4 years, I worked like crazy, expanding the company. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't just my work. We had an incredible team that grew over time, people who really committed to the vision of turning this mediocre family business into something big. We implemented new technology, automated processes, expanded into new markets, and basically transformed the company into a modern operation that competed with much larger distributors. By the time I turned 30, the company was billing $150 million a year. We had offices in 4 states, and we were recognized in the industry as innovators. All this time, my father was still officially CEO, but I ran everything, made all the important decisions, led meetings with investors, negotiated the big contracts, everything. Owen had gotten the title of Director of Business Development or something like that, which basically meant he went to networking events, played golf with potential clients, and occasionally showed up at the office to have coffee with the sales team. He didn't do anything substantial, but he didn't get in the way much either. So I thought, well, at least he's not causing problems. My relationship with my parents during these years was complicated. My father clearly appreciated what I had accomplished. He told me he was proud, but there was always this weird thing where he kept treating Owen like he was more important, you know? Like when there were family events or dinners with important clients, my father always introduced Owen first. Always talked about Owen with this tone of pride he never used with me. And I tried not to let it bother me, but obviously it bothered me. I'm human. My mother was more neutral. She wanted everyone to get along and avoided conflicts, like classic family mediator type. So, we get to like 6 months ago. My father called me into his office on a Friday afternoon and told me he was going to call a shareholders meeting for the following Monday, that he wanted to make an important announcement about the company's future. I assumed he was finally going to announce his retirement and that I would officially take on the CEO role, which made sense because I was basically already doing that job. I spent the weekend preparing some documents about the strategic direction I wanted to take, financial projections for the next 5 years, ideas for expanding internationally. I was excited, honestly. Monday came and the boardroom was full. All the main shareholders, which was basically my father with 60%, my mother with 20%, Owen and me with 10% each, plus the executive team I had built, and some legal and financial advisors. My father started the presentation talking about the company's history, how he had founded it 30 years ago, the challenges we had faced, the incredible growth of recent years, all very emotional and sentimental. Then he said the time had come to think about the next generation of leadership, that he was 68 years old and wanted to start reducing his active participation. And I was sitting there smiling because I thought, okay, here it comes. And then my father said, that's why I've decided to name Owen as the company's next CEO. I swear the air left the room. I froze. I literally couldn't process what I had just heard. I looked at Owen, and he was sitting there with a smile, like he already knew. Obviously, he already knew. And then I looked at my mother, and she was looking down, avoiding my gaze. My father continued talking about how Owen had the necessary leadership qualities, his charisma, his ability to connect with people, all these vague things that didn't mean anything, and I kept sitting there in shock trying to understand what the hell was happening. When the meeting ended, I tried to talk to my father privately. I asked him why he hadn't considered me for CEO when I had been the one who saved and rebuilt the company, and he told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Liam, you're brilliant with numbers and strategy, but Owen has the charisma a leader needs. People follow him naturally, and besides, he's your older brother. It's the right thing. The right thing. As if leadership of a $150 million company should be decided by birth order and not by competence. The next 2 months were the worst of my life up to that point. Owen officially took over as CEO and immediately started making changes. He hired his own advisors, college friends who knew nothing about our industry, started questioning all my decisions, and worst of all, started taking credit for everything I had built. In meetings with clients and with the press, Owen talked as if he had been the architect of the company's growth, as if the strategies had been his ideas. And my father supported him in this because apparently he had decided to rewrite history. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when Owen accused me in a board meeting of making unauthorized decisions and financial misconduct. He said he had been reviewing my moves from recent years and had found irregularities, suspicious transfers, contracts I had signed, without proper approval. Basically, he accused me of stealing or doing something fraudulent. I couldn't believe it. Like, I literally couldn't believe my own brother was doing this. And when I tried to defend myself and show documentation proving that everything I had done was completely authorized and completely legal, Owen interrupted me and said my behavior was affecting company morale and that it was best if I took some time off. That same afternoon, like 3 hours after that meeting, Owen called me into his office, my old office, actually, and told me I was fired. Just like that. He told me the board had voted Lee. There was no vote, and they had decided it was better if I was no longer part of the company. He called security, and they escorted me out of the building while I packed my personal things in a cardboard box. And the whole team I had hired and trained looked at me with faces of shock and confusion. Some were literally crying because they knew this was a total injustice. I got to the apartment that night and sat on the couch for like 3 hours, doing nothing, just staring at the wall, trying to process that the company I had saved and built had just kicked me to the curb by my own brother. The feeling of betrayal was physical. I mean, my chest hurt. I couldn't breathe well. I felt like someone had emptied me out inside and there was nothing left. But after those 3 hours, something changed. I got up, opened my laptop, and started working. Remember I mentioned that I had rebuilt the company from scratch 5 years ago? Well, turns out when you're rebuilding a company and you have total authority to make decisions, you can do some pretty smart things. 4 years ago, I had created a subsidiary called Tech Core Solutions, completely legal, completely documented, and had gradually transferred all the company's valuable assets to that subsidiary. The patents we had developed, the exclusive contracts with our most important suppliers, the proprietary software systems. I had designed everything. The parent company technically only rented those assets from Tech Core Solutions through contracts I had carefully structured. And here's the interesting part. I was the sole owner of Tech Core Solutions. My father had signed the documents when I presented them to him years ago, because he trusted me, and because at that time we were busy saving the company from bankruptcy, so he signed everything I put in front of him. The company's lawyers had reviewed and approved everything. It was completely within the law, but nobody except me and a couple of very loyal legal advisors really understood the complete structure. So, that night, sitting in my apartment after being fired, I sent a formal email to the company, notifying that Tech Core Solutions was canceling all licensing contracts effective in 30 days. What this meant in practical terms is that the company would no longer have access to any of the critical operating systems, any of the patents, any of the exclusive supply contracts, nothing. Basically, the company would become an empty shell. But I didn't stop there. Over the next 2 days, from my apartment, I activated a series of automated systems I had implemented years ago, systems that monitored all financial transactions and all corporate communications for irregularities. And surprise, surprise, those systems started generating reports showing that Owen had been making unauthorized transfers to personal accounts, that he had been inflating expense reports, that basically he had been stealing from the company for months. They weren't huge amounts, like maybe $200,000 total, but it was clear and documented fraud. On day 15 after my firing, I sent all those reports simultaneously to the board of directors, to the company's external auditors, and to the corresponding federal authorities. I also sent an information package to each of the company's 50 key employees, explaining the complete situation, showing them evidence of Owen's incompetence, how he had betrayed me, and offering them positions at my new company I was founding. Things moved fast after that. On day 18, federal agents arrived at the corporate office to question Owen about the embezzlement charges. On day 20, 93% of key employees had resigned and signed contracts with my new company. On day 22, Owen was formally charged with fraud and was escorted out of the building by the same security people who had escorted me. On day 25, the company's stock price had dropped like 85% because investors realized the company literally had no valuable operating assets. Everything was in my subsidiary, and I had no intention of renewing those contracts. On day 30, the company announced it was entering bankruptcy proceedings. My father tried to call me like 50 times during this period, but I didn't answer any of his calls. My mother finally showed up at my apartment crying, saying they needed help, that they were going to lose everything. That, please, reconsider. And I simply told her, you chose Owen over me. Now live with that decision. It sounded harsh, and maybe it was, but after what they had done to me, I didn't feel any obligation to rescue them again. 3 months later, my parents showed up at my new office. We already had nice offices. My new company was growing fast, with all the talent I had brought from the sinking ship, and my father looked old suddenly, like he had aged 10 years in 3 months. They asked me for financial help, said they were going to lose their house, that their savings had evaporated with the company's collapse, and basically begged me to buy their shares in the bankrupt company for something, for anything. I told them I would consider buying their shares, but under very specific conditions. First, they would have to sign documents publicly acknowledging my role in creating the value of the original company. Second, they would have to cut all contact with Owen until he served his sentence because, yes, he was eventually sentenced to 4 years in prison for fraud. Third, any money I gave them would come with the condition that they use it responsibly under financial supervision. My father got furious, started yelling that I was being vengeful and cruel, that how could I treat my own family like this? And I simply told him, Dad, you treated me like a disposable employee after I saved your company. Owen betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now you want me to save you again. These are my conditions. Take them or leave them. They eventually accepted because they had no other choice. My new company is called Innovate Distribution Solutions. Generic name, but functional. And honestly, it's been an incredible success. In 6 months, we launched a complete line of new products that revolutionized how supply chains work in our industry. We won contracts with some of the sector's biggest clients and basically became the main competitor in the market. The team that came with me from the old company is happy. They're making more money. They have better work-life balance, and above all, they feel their contributions are valued. It's been 3 years since all this. My company now does like $200 million a year in revenue. We're recognized as innovation leaders in the industry, and I've become kind of a case study in business schools about how to build resilient companies. Though obviously the version they tell in schools omits all the dramatic details about family betrayal and calculated revenge. My relationship with my parents is cordial but distant. I see them at Christmas and Thanksgiving. We talk about superficial things, but the trust we had before is completely broken, and I don't think it'll come back. My mother sometimes tries to mediate and improve things, but my father is too proud to really admit he was wrong, so we're stuck in this awkward limbo of being polite but not close. Owen served 2 years of his sentence and got out for good behavior 6 months ago. And honestly, I don't know what he's doing now. I don't care enough to find out. The weird thing is, sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. When I'm in the office late at night reviewing financial reports, or when I'm in a meeting with investors talking about expansion strategies, there are moments where I think about how it would have been if things had gone differently. If my father had chosen me instead of Owen, if my brother hadn't been so ambitious and treacherous, if I could have just had a normal relationship with my family while building this company. But then I remember that feeling of sitting in my apartment after being fired, that feeling of total emptiness, and I realized that what I built afterward was stronger precisely because I had to build it from a place of absolute nothing. I didn't have my family's backing. I didn't have my father's company name. I only had my knowledge, my work ethic, and a team of people who believed in me more than my own family believed. Last, week 1 of my senior managers asked me if I would ever forgive my family for what happened. I told him forgiveness is complicated, that it's not something you can just decide to do. It's more like something that maybe happens over time or maybe doesn't. What I do know is I'm not waiting for that forgiveness to be happy or successful. I no longer need their validation or approval to know that what I did was incredible, that turning a bankrupt company into a 150 million empire was incredible, and that building a new company from scratch after being betrayed was also incredible. I guess in the end, this story doesn't have a clear moral or a perfect ending where everyone makes peace and lives happily. Life doesn't work like that, especially when there are deep betrayals involved. What I can say is I learned that talent and hard work eventually win over favoritism and family politics, but the price of that victory sometimes includes losing relationships you thought were fundamental. You have to be at peace with that price, because if you're not, the victory feels empty. I'm at peace with my decisions. I have a thriving company, a team that respects me, and the satisfaction of knowing I did it without anyone's help when they took everything from me. Is it enough? Most days, yes. Some days I still wake up and think about how it would have been to have my father's support from the beginning, but those days are less and less frequent, and that, I guess, is the best I can hope for.